It's been a year of transition here in Season 1 for Everton and new manager Graham Potter. Up and down form sees us sitting in 14th place in the Premier League, 8 points above the drop. But we've added a number of new players to the squad. Arno Armadodjic, Reiss Nelson, Maxim de Kuyper and Jack Harrison all joining in the summer, whilst James Justin and Justin Deal arrived in January. And with a mid-table finish the target here in Season 1, we can certainly look to grow and develop those new players and kick on into Season 2. We are only 10 points away from Spurs, so not a million miles away from the European places that we will have our sights set on in 3 to 5 years' time. And Spurs are our first opponents of the episode, so it'll be a good opportunity to see how we match up against the kind of opposition that we're going to be looking to be competing with over the course of Graham Potter's reign. Spurs line up pretty much how they did the last time that we played them, but they are on a terrible run of form, having won just one of the last 5 games and losing each of the other 4. We did manage to run out 2-0 winners at Tottenham Hotspur Stadium, but it's going to be a much tougher affair this time around. Jared Branthwaite, Maxim de Kuyper and Jack Harrison all still out with injuries. So instead it's going to be Ben Godfrey and James Justin coming into the back 5. Dwight McNeil joining Reiss Nelson in support of Beto up front. And we had a bright start to the game. Nathan Patterson working the ball down the right-hand side before Reiss Nelson cuts inside and forces a good save from Vicario. But Reiss Nelson saw red shortly after his challenge deemed reckless and dangerous by the referee. But I think it's a relatively harsh decision, a yellow card for certain. But to send Reiss Nelson off for that seems a bit extreme. Regardless, Beto opened the scoring on the 15th minute. Nathan Patterson again working the ball down the right-hand side. The ball falling to Beto in the box, and he made absolutely no mistake with the finish. Half volley past Vicario in off the post, 1-0 Everton. We didn't have the lead for long though. The ball dropped to Yves Bissouma, laid off to Giovanni Lo Celso, and he absolutely buried it. And Dejan Kulusevski put Tottenham ahead just 10 minutes later. Heung-min Son put the ball into the box from the free kick, and Kulusevski rising above Onana. How there's no foul in there, I don't know. Reiss Nelson's was a red, but this isn't a foul. Come on, ref. Come on. And from there, it was all Tottenham. Heung-min Son putting them 3-1 up after the break with a penalty. Ben Godfrey, the victim of another poor decision by the referee. Jordan Pickford had a good game in goal, but he couldn't prevent Tottenham from scoring 2 more goals late in the game. This one, an absolute worldie from Dejan Kulusevski, curling the ball into the far corner after cutting inside onto his left. And Yves Bissouma put the icing on the cake late in the game. Angel Correa squaring after Jordan Pickford had came out to smother, and Bissouma just tapping into an empty net. So really disappointing result, obviously, but it was a game that was absolutely ruined by the referee. I'm actually fairly proud of the team. We put in a really good performance against the odds, and we matched Tottenham when we were 11 on 11 and even gave them a run for their money at times when we were down a man. It wasn't just 10 versus 11 though, it was 10 versus 12. That does bring us to our featured game of the episode, our FA Cup replay versus Swansea City. And ahead of this one, Graham Potter recalled Youssef Chermiti, who had been out on loan. He's had a decent spell away from Everton and he has grown to a 73 overall. With the form that Beto has been in this season, it's far less certain that he'll leave the club than it first seemed. And if he does end up staying and we continue to go with a true striker up front, Chermiti would be an ideal backup to Beto. Chermiti takes his place at the head of a front 3 today alongside Lewis Dobbin and Justin Deal. The 3 in midfield as well, Onana, Idrissa Gueye and Abdoulaye Doucouré, leaves just a back 4 of Nathan Patterson, Armadodjic, Noah Mbamba and Justin James to stand in front of João Virginia. So a 4-3-3 today for Everton. And despite the strong starting lineup that we fielded, Swansea City actually ended up taking the lead in the game. Jerry Yates finding himself in space in the penalty area and slotting the ball beyond João Virginia, who was slightly unsighted. Amadou Onana put his hat in the ring about 25 minutes into the game though, with this spectacular strike from the edge of the penalty area. Worked into his feet from Abdoulaye Doucouré from the throw-in, and he absolutely unleashed the Swansea City goalkeeper helpless. And usually that would be the best goal that a player scores in their season, potentially even in their career. I'm not convinced it was the best goal that Amadou Onana scored in this game. Again, worked into his feet on the edge of the penalty area, takes a touch or two to get it out, and then again fires across the Swansea City goalkeeper into the bottom corner this time. And just after the break, Amadou Onana found himself with a hat-trick. Nathan Patterson crossing into the box, Amadou Onana rising highest, and nodding comfortably home beyond, again, the helpless Swansea City goalkeeper. Justin Deal, again, looked promising in this one. Looked really dangerous with the ball at his feet. But like in previous games, the final product just wasn't quite there. Swansea City did push to try and get back into the game. We dealt with their pressure well, but they did get a goal back about 82 minutes into the game. Josh Ginnelly firing across João Virginia to make it 3-2. But 3-2 ultimately was the scoreline. It probably shouldn't have even been that close when we look at the final statistics. So we did make it tough for ourselves, but we do progress to the next round of the FA Cup. It'll be interesting to see who we are drawn with in the next round. The draw has already been made. We face Manchester City in the Premier League in our next game of the episode, but we'll also face them to round out the episode now as we host them in the next round of the FA Cup at Goodison Park. Manchester City beat us 5-0 last time we played them, so we'll be hoping to put in a better performance this time around at the Etihad. It's going to be a tough test, though. I'm not sure there's a player on the screen currently that wouldn't walk into our team. Potentially Jordan Pickford would keep his place ahead of Ortega in goal at the very least. He certainly keeps his place in goal today. A familiar back five with James Justin coming in to replace the still injured Maxim de Kuyper. Onana and Garner in midfield, and McNeil will sit in front of James Justin to again provide a bit more defensive support. Man City started the game as brightly as you would think that they would. Jordan Pickford being forced into a couple of saves, first from Julian Alvarez from range, and then again later when Julian Alvarez pulled it back for Haaland to strike from a narrow angle. And it was Julian Alvarez that broke the deadlock around the half-an-hour mark. Some really good link-up play between Haaland and De Bruyne before Alvarez found himself with the ball at his feet on the edge of the box, and he fired into the top corner past Jordan Pickford. We did push in the second half for an equaliser, but that just invited more Man City pressure on the break. Jordan Pickford coming up with a couple of big saves to keep us in the game, and eventually the pressure did tell as Man City hit us on a quick counter-attack, and Erling Haaland put the game to bed with a second goal, his first of the game. But Man City do run out 2-0 winners after a pretty dominant performance, all being told. Which brings us to our next game of the episode versus Crystal Palace. Currently on a really bad run of form in the Premier League, having not won a game since that trip to Tottenham Hotspur Stadium almost 2 months ago. Crystal Palace on their own pretty terrible run of form, having picked up just 2 points from their last 5 games. Michael Elise does feature in the side this time around though, whereas Abdoulaye Doucouré returns to Graham Potter's starting 11, and Lewis Dobbin gets another chance to prove what he can do alongside Nelson and Beto up front. We got off to exactly the start that we needed if we were going to win the game. The ball looping up in the Crystal Palace box after a cross, and Beto rising highest on the second chance to nod past the Crystal Palace goalkeeper Sam Johnston and put Everton 1-0 up 10 minutes into the game. This challenge from James Tarkowski was apparently enough to give Crystal Palace a penalty, but fortunately Jordan Pickford was equal to the effort and made the save. And Crystal Palace grew into the game in the second half and forced a number of other good saves from Jordan Pickford. Michael Elise was their most dangerous player, as we anticipated he might be, and he probably came closest to scoring. Jordan Pickford again equal to it. So we did manage to get back in the win column today, just a single goal the difference, but it is 3 more points on the board, and that does mean that we move back up to 12th place in the Premier League, moving back up towards the top half of the table again. And finally, we are starting to see some progress in terms of our injuries. Jared Branthwaite is likely not going to be available for our next game against Brighton and Hove Albion, but he is back in training. Noah Mbamba comes into the back five for this one, and James Garner and Dwight McNeil also return to the side. Whilst Brighton line up in pretty much the same way they did when we first played them, Matoma again only with a place on the bench. And Brighton were an excellent side, completely outplayed us, but we did manage to come away with a 1-0 victory. Brighton worked several openings, playing some quick, intricate passes between their midfield and their front lines, and we had to rely on Jordan Pickford a number of times during the course of the game. Fortunately, we did hold Brighton mostly to shots from the edge of the area, and shots that had to come through either bodies that got blocked or that Pickford could comfortably parry away from a good position. How Pascal Gross ended up putting this one over, though, I have no idea. And it was just the one goal that we managed to score, but what was a goal that made all the difference in the game? A really nice ball from Dwight McNeil, chipped over the Brighton back line into the path of Reece Nelson, who took it down on his chest with the one touch and tucked it away with his left foot with the second. Which brings us to our final game of the episode, a second matchup against Manchester City. We have already reached the round of 16 in the competition, which was the objective the board set for us. So fortunately, even if we don't manage to get anything out of the fixture like the game earlier in the episode, it's not going to hold us back too much. There are a handful of relatively low-level opponents left in the competition, though. Barnsley take on Aston Villa, Middlesbrough take on Leeds United, Wolves and Brentford both still in the competition, along with the likes of Preston, Burnley, Charlton, Hull and Luton Town. So not only are we going to put a strong 11 out onto the field, we're going to put a forward-thinking 11 out there as well. Dwight McNeil making the start at wing-back, Justin Deal making the start behind Beto just ahead of him, and Abdoulaye Doucouré coming into the midfield in place of James Garner. We're going to have a real good go at winning this game. And despite the statistics, we actually did have a good go at winning this one. We started the game particularly well, but Manchester City quickly established their dominance and ended up winning 4-1. I won't bore you with the highlights of this one because it is pretty much a repeat of the game you saw earlier in the episode. Justin Deal did manage to get on the score sheet late in the game with his first goal for Everton, but O'Reilly had already scored 2 goals by that point, one either side of half-time. Haaland opened the scoring just after the half-hour mark, and Nathan Patterson ends up actually taking credit for the second goal, an own goal. It was a header from Haaland from a corner. Patterson was on the post, which leaves just the Premier League to focus on in the remaining couple of months. We end the episode sitting in 11th place, so just 1 place and 4 points away from Brentford in the top half of the table. We are now 13 points from relegation with just 12 games left to play, so our security, our safety in the Premier League all but established, you would imagine. So it'll be back to regularly scheduled programming in the next episode. A game against West Ham at home to take on before we travel to Old Trafford to take on Manchester United. And then a return fixture against Liverpool as we host them in the Merseyside derby, this time at Goodison Park. No prizes for guessing what the featured game will be in the next episode. I hope to see you there. Take it easy.